Yo, what's going on guys? Zack here, and it's another video, so it's time for another One Piece video about a random topic that's 20 to 35 minutes long. A couple of weeks ago, we started a series where I'll be covering every single Paramecia devil fruit that we've seen in the One Piece story so far, and today we're here to continue it. Last time, we only ended up covering 5 of the over 100 Paramecia type devil fruits that we've seen so far, but that was because we just so happened to cover the main character last time, and there was a lot to talk about regarding him. Today, we're definitely going to be able to cover more since there will almost definitely be less to talk about, and I love getting to talk about the more niche characters on this channel. I'm going to try my hardest to cover at least 10 characters and devil fruits in this video, but if I feel like it's getting too long at any point, I will just cut it off after a random character. With that being said, we definitely have a lot to talk about today, so I think that we should just hop right into things with our first character. And for our first character, we may be talking about her a little bit longer than everybody else today, as we just so happen to be starting this part of the series off with a member of the Straw Hats as well. This is because Nico Robin ate a Paramecia type devil fruit called the Hana no Mi that allows the user to replicate and sprout pieces of their body from the surface of any object or living thing. As further allusion to this, pinkish white petal-like particles form at and then swirl away from where the parts sprout and vanish, as well as around the user itself. I think it's safe to say that the Hana no Mi is one of the most iconic devil fruits in the entire One Piece story, and that's almost entirely because of the character that ate it. Not only is it a really cool power for Robin to have, it also fits her character perfectly because of the way that she used to have to sneak around and run from person to person in order to survive. Robin has been using her powers as far back as her childhood, when she was demonized by other Ohara children for her bizarre abilities and considered a freaky monster as a result. During those times, her devil fruit was mostly used for self-defense purposes against those same children. As an adult, Robin utilizes the Hana no Mi primarily for combat. Her fighting style is mostly based on submission and grappling, and later wrestling, replicating her arms on specific points of her opponent's body to either immobilize, disarm, or perform painful joint locks. When Robin activates her fruit's powers, she often takes a specific stance with her arms crossed in front of her body, almost as if she were concentrating. Outside of combat, the Hana no Mi is plenty versatile, letting Robin multitask or help herself with some leisure activity. She may also employ her extra limbs for sillier applications, such as tickling or making comical imagery. In my opinion, Robin's devil fruit is one that would be the most useful if you were to suddenly gain its power in the real world, solely because all the tasks that it would allow you to do. Even sitting here now, I'm thinking that if I had the Hana no Mi, then I'd be able to sprout extra hands and fingers for myself so I could type out my scripts considerably faster. Robin also uses it for things like moving around heavy objects, but just like every other fruit that we've talked about on this channel before, Robin has some techniques that she uses with this fruit that I want to discuss today. The first is kind of her signature attack in my opinion, and that's her clutch attack. There are a ton of different versions of this attack depending on how many hands Robin decides to sprout when she uses it, but we'll use Dos Fleur Clutch as an example. In this technique, Robin sprouts 2 hands to cover the opponent's mouth and then bends them backward with bone-breaking results. She can use this move on at least 2 opponents simultaneously, though it's not explicitly identified as a Dos Fleur move. This has to be one of, if not Robin's most used attacks during her time in the One Piece story, and that makes a ton of sense just because of how simple and effective it is. The most satisfying one is most definitely the one that she used against Spandam in my opinion, as he deserved even more torment than the little that Robin was actually able to put him through. With that being said, there's one more technique that we need to talk about, and it's definitely sort of an ultimate technique that Robin unveiled during her fight with Black Maria during the Wano arc. This technique is called Demonio Fleur, and it's similar to Gigante Fleur. Robin sprouts a giant copy of her upper body, but this time, her double features several extra appendages, such as a pair of bat-like wings, shaded skin, fangs, and horns, giving it the appearance of a traditional devil, which may intimidate the opponent and cause them to lower their guard. So basically, it's a form that really leans into the demon label that Robin received when she was a child, and she has one attack that she's showcased in this form so far. This attack is called Grand Jacuzzi Clutch, and in this attack, Robin's Demonio copy uses multiple sprouted arms to latch onto the target and pull themselves towards it after the target is locked onto the inescapable grappling hold. Assisted by an assortment of giant sprouted limbs, the Demonio finishes them off with a clutch. This was first seen used against Black Maria, being strong enough to knock her out. Even in her Demonio form, Clutch has been shown to be her signature technique, and while a big portion of the community believes that Robin used armament hockey here, I'm not one of those people. With that being said, if Robin ever does gain the ability to use armament hockey, that combined with her kinda overpowered devil fruit would be a huge asset for the Straw Hats. And with that, it's time for us to move on to our next user, as Galdino, better known as Mr. 3, ate a Paramecia type devil fruit called the Doru no Mi. The Doru no Mi allows the user to create large quantities of candle wax from their body and control it, making the user a candle human. So basically, Mr. 3 is a cum man, and the way that Oda draws it definitely doesn't help when people want to refer to it as such. With that being said, we've actually seen this fruit in action quite a bit, as not only was Galdino a huge part of the Little Garden arc, he also played a pretty massive role in the Impel Down arc. We could also just see this power in use again at any time, since Galdino rolls with Buggy nowadays, but it's been a while since they've been in action, so I'm not gonna get my hopes up. Now, while Candle Wax doesn't sound like the most interesting power on the surface, if you're creative enough, you can make any power cool, and luckily Oda is pretty damn creative. With that being said, there are of course two techniques that I want to talk about when it comes to the Doru no Mi, and the first one is called Tokudai Candle Service Set. In this technique, Mr. 3 creates a massive birthday cake shaped wax arrangement with a pillar on top of the lower floors of the cake, then making a spinning half dome on top of that with burning candles. He then places the targets he has captured onto the cake. As the candles burn, they slowly encase the targets in wax vapor and essentially turn them into wax statues. If left unchecked for too long, the targets suffocate, and this was first seen being used on the captured Zoro, Nami, and Vivi. This is quite literally what the entire climax of the Little Garden arc revolves around, and it's actually pretty impressive how close Galdino got to turning some of the most important Straw Hats into statues. The only way to counter this thing is through Galdino's main weakness, which is fire, and that's actually kinda sad given how common fire type attacks can be in the One Piece story. It also led to the really cool moment where Zoro almost cut his feet off in order to escape and defeat Mr. 3, but luckily he didn't have to do that, and we have the two-footed Zoro that we have today. Something really cool about Mr. 3 is that even though he was an enemy of the Straw Hats for a short time, he was also an ally of Luffy for a short time, and that leads into the second technique that I want to talk about today. This is because he has literal combination techniques with Luffy during the Impel Down arc, and it's legitimately some of the coolest team-up attacks that we've seen in the One Piece story so far. While the powers of the Doru no Mi have been used exclusively by Mr. 3, they have also been used inadvertently by Luffy. Discovered when Mr. 3 encased his feet in wax, Luffy uses the hardened substance in conjunction with his own devil fruit powers to deliver attacks strengthened by Mr. 3's wax. These techniques are temporary as the impact delivered by it breaks the wax, and have only been done when wax has been applied to Luffy's limbs, usually inadvertently by Mr. 3. During the breakout of Impel Down, the powers of the devil fruit have been used purposely with Luffy when Mr. 3 allied with him. One of the most prominent is a set of gloves and boots resembling those of Mr. 3's Candle Champion to combat against the Warden of Impel Down, Magellan, and his Doku no Mi powers. These armor parts were melted by Mr. 3's Doru Kaijo when the pieces were infected with Magellan's Kinjinte poison to prevent Luffy from being infected as well. So basically, Luffy is in a mech suit made out of wax when he uses these techniques, and they're of course only possible because of Galdino's Doru no Mi. The technique that we'll be talking about is called Doru Candle Armor, and in this technique, Mr. 3 encases Luffy's arms and legs in wax armor resembling a large pair of boxing gloves and long robotic legs. He did this to enhance the power of his blows and protect him from Magellan's poison, and while this technique wasn't named in the manga, it was in the anime. Since this is a form, it also has techniques associated with it, and the one that I want to discuss today is called Gomu no Champion Rifle. This was a technique that was came up with by Luffy to combat against Magellan, the Warden of Impel Down. After having his arm encased in wax, Luffy delivers an attack resembling his rifle technique. Because of the wax encasing his arm, Luffy is able to execute this attack without being poisoned. Now, even though it technically is just Luffy using one of the attacks that we see him use all the time, the fact that he's encased in Mr. 3's wax makes it worth talking about in this video. Ever since I first saw this combination attack when I was watching the One Piece anime for the first time, I knew that it would be something that stuck with me, and I'm happy that I got to talk about it today. Galdino will never be on the list of the strongest characters in all of One Piece, but he was able to make it pretty far with a fruit that a lot of people would probably give up on, and that's why he'll always have my respect. Now for our next user, we've got another guy that's a little more important to the story than you would expect, as Wapol ate a Paramecia type devil fruit called the Baku no Mi. The Baku no Mi is a devil fruit that allows the user to eat any object, including living things, and assimilate it with either their own body or other objects they eat. Wapol has been one of my least favorite One Piece characters ever since I first watched the anime during the pandemic, but his fruit is not one of the reasons as to why. I just think that he's pretty poorly written, and the parts of the Drum Island arc that focus on him specifically are a little bit boring, but his devil fruit has always been something that interested me. Maybe that's just because I'm somebody that's always interested in a universe's power system, no matter what it is, but no matter what, he definitely leaves an interesting first impression. This is because the first time that we even see Wapol, he's straight up eating parts of the Straw Hat ship, and it honestly feels like an anomaly, even though they've already been on the Grand Line for a little while. The fruit's major strength, as demonstrated by Wapol, is that the user gains the ability to stretch open their mouths to large sizes and be able to eat things in massive proportions. It also strengthens their teeth and digestive system, allowing them to consume things that would otherwise be inedible or toxic to regular people, ranging from inanimate objects such as weapons to even living creatures such as humans. The user can then transform any part of their bodies into whatever they had eaten, enabling them to produce weapons for offensive capabilities, or they can fuse objects or creatures together to create new things. The fruit's bestowed powers, as used by Wapol, have been used mostly to help Wapol engorge himself on various things. These include various things from knives to the houses of Wapol's former subjects. As he often eats other people's property, he often causes great annoyance to those around him. Wapol can also use the fruit's power for combat purposes by either swallowing his opponent whole or by using the fruit's transformation powers to aid him. He also managed to survive an avalanche and save his two henchmen by swallowing the snow masses and keeping his subordinates safe in his mouth. After being defeated by Luffy and becoming a vagrant, Wapol was able to come up with more benevolent applications of his fruit's powers, serving more productive purposes. Using his Baku factory technique, Wapol was able to produce toys to sell for a living. In return, he was able to create a new industry for him to rule over. Speaking of that new industry for him to rule over, we'll definitely be discussing it before this section is over, but we do have a few of his techniques to talk about before that. The first of these techniques that we'll be discussing is called Wapol House, and something tells me that the name was inspired by Waffle House in some way, but I can't find anything to confirm my theory at the moment. Anyway, in this technique, after one butter sauteed cannon, one cannon extra rare, a cannonball and gunpowder salad, and one grilled house, Wapol absorbs them into his body and transforms into a house complete with doors, a chimney, and windows included. His arms are also transformed into cannons, and the chimney can also act as a cannon. This was a technique that he used in his fight against Luffy and Chopper, and seeing a grown man just transform into a house is something that's pretty hard to forget. I felt like I needed to talk about this technique solely because of how goofy the art is when he transforms into it, but also because it did lead to a few more techniques that we won't be talking about in this video. Speaking of techniques that are worth talking about, we've got the second and final one for this video that's called Baku Factory. This is a technique in which Wapol combines two or more different things he has swallowed to create something else. This was first seen being used by Wapol when Wapol fused chess and Marimo together to create Tress Marimo. After being defeated by Luffy, Wapol used this technique often in order to create toys as a means of livelihood. A byproduct found in the toys created by this technique that was discovered by scientists is a new type of steel, hinting that this fruit may also fuse undiscovered minerals, with this steel being dubbed by scientists as Wapo metal. So there are two things to talk about when it comes to this technique, as Tress Marimo is basically a super soldier, but Wapo metal has made Wapol one of the richest people in the entire One Piece world at the current day of the story. Even though Tress Marimo was defeated by Chopper in the end, he needed to use multiple rumble balls in order to do so, and exerted himself so much that Luffy was the only one left to take Wapol down for good. Getting into Wapo metal, however, it's a special kind of alloy that was inadvertently invented by Wapol when he was turning garbage into toys during his cover story, manufactured via his Baku no Mi powers. It was this metal that turned him from a homeless bum into a very wealthy CEO of a toy company. His Wapol metal toys were so successful, the world nobles granted him a new kingdom as a reward. As an example, Franky used Wapol metal for his Iron Pirate General Franky as its shape memory alloy that can be restored to its pre-configured shapes, being used to create merger modes in the components of General Franky. Now, I do find it kind of hilarious that Franky used Wapol metal because I don't think he would have if he knew what kind of trouble Wapol caused his current crewmates, but he was also the guy that built built the Thousand Sunny out of the wood that he beat up Usopp in order to get. So basically, even though Wapol is a character that you wish was super forgettable because of his time as a main villain, he plays a bigger role in the story as a whole than you would think. I mean, even now there's some pretty crazy shit going down with him, since he's with both Vivi and Big News Morgan, and we all know the things that the both of them saw during the Reverie. I also believe that Wapol Metal could play a big role in the final war with how it's been hyped up as this super metal since its introduction, but only time will tell if I'm right. And with that, we need to move on to another fan favorite character, as our guy Bon Clay ate a Paramecia type devil fruit called the Mane Mane no Mi. The Mane Mane no Mi is a devil fruit that allows the user to turn themselves into a physical double of anyone they touch, making the user an imitating human. This is another one of these fruits in this series that's had more than one user in the One Piece universe so far, as Kurozumi Higurashi was the person that had the fruit before Bon Clay got his hands on it. Just like the Bambu Bambu no Mi, however, we'll give Higurashi her own section in a video in the future, as she's bound to have some different techniques than our guy Bon Clay. The fruit allows the user to impersonate someone they touch with their right hand, adopting their face, physique, and voice. The fruit keeps a perfect recollection of every person whose form they have ever copied, so the user will not forget any person's appearance whom they imitate. There's no time limit for the transformation, and the user can revert back to their own body by touching their face with their left hand, even if unintentionally. So basically, this is the perfect devil fruit for deception, and that's exactly what Bon Clay has used it for during his time in the story. It was a really important aspect of the Alabasta arc, where he used the king's face to incite revolution, and even during the Impel Down arc when he first introduced himself to Luffy again. He's also the reason that Luffy and crew were able to sail away from Impel Down because of the way that he impersonated Magellan at the end of the arc, and it truly felt like a sacrifice at the time. That's right, Bon Clay is still alive. It was revealed in a cover story, and he's yet another character that should make another appearance before the story ends. Now, you wouldn't really expect a fruit like this to have techniques associated with it, but it does, and we'll be talking about two of them today. The first one that we'll be discussing is called Mane Mane Memory, which is basically Bon Clay's signature technique. In this technique, Bon Clay transforms into somebody he has physically touched, taking on their properties including strength and form. While this contributes little to no advantage in combat, video games such as One Piece Grand Battle Rush depict this move as being able to allow Bon Clay to mimic the faces of other Baroque Works operatives, allowing him to adopt range attacks using rifles and cannons. This is essentially the technique that allows Bon Clay to use his powers in the first place, and the fact that he can tap into any face that he's ever copied is actually really cool. And with that, it leads into a technique that builds off of Mane Mane Memory, and that technique is called Mane Mane Montage. In this technique, Bon Clay makes a new face by using different parts from his memory of various faces. He only uses this technique a few times, and it's mostly done for comedic effect, but Bon Clay is a pretty comedic character, so I don't mind his techniques not being all that serious. Just like pretty much every other One Piece fan, I'm a huge fan of Bon Clay, and his devil fruit is one of the things that makes him him, so it was cool to talk about today. And with that, it's time for us to move on to the final character that we'll be talking about in this video, as I've decided that we're only going to cover 5 characters in each part of this series. This is because Daz Bones ate a Paramecia type devil fruit called the Supa no Mi that enables the user's body to gain characteristics of a steel blade to attack opponents with, making the user a full-body bladed human. Most people know Daz Bones better as Mr. One, as he plays a massive role during the Alabasta arc, and his fight against Zoro is easily one of the highlights of that arc. With that being said, we'll definitely be seeing this fruit in action more often as the series reaches its conclusion, as Daz is also a member of the Cross Guild alongside his longtime business partner Crocodile. The fruit's abilities were also duplicated in the Seraph S. Hawk via the transfusion of green blood, and I just know that the Seraphims are going to appear more in the story before it ends as well. The major strength of the fruit, as demonstrated by Daz, is that its user can create strong blades from any part of their body. The ability allows the user's body to gain characteristics of steel, more specifically a blade. The user is immune to most slashing attacks and can cut through almost anything, from flesh to stone. The user seems to have the ability to cut through objects without the need to physically touch them, much like flying slashes used by various swordsmen. This has been shown through Daz's Atomic Spurt, Spar Break, and Spar Claw, the latter in at least one instance. Also, as demonstrated by moves like Daz's Spiral Hollow, the user can also make the blade spin like saws or drills. As an assassin and martial artist, Daz primarily uses the fruit's bestowed powers for combat, using them both for defense and offense. His style consists mainly of slashes, chops, chops and acrobatic kicks that are further enhanced by the effects of his devil fruit. He also has the ability to sprout blades on the soles of his feet, allowing him to skate on solid ground as if it were ice. In spite of his heavy reliance on blades, Daz does not consider himself a swordsman. Also, until he met Roronoa Zoro, Daz had claimed that no swordsman had ever so much as put a scratch on his body. For this reason, Daz intentionally let his guard down and goaded Zoro into attempting to cut him down multiple times during that fight, confident that the pirate hunter would be unable to wound him, which allowed for his eventual defeat. So basically, Daz Bones is one giant walking sword, and pretty much every single One Piece fan knows just how overpowered that could be in this universe. There's a legitimate chance that this guy could have black blades all over his body, and I just know that he's going to have armament hockey the next time that we see him, and that honestly makes me worried for whoever he fights next. With that being said, we of course have some techniques that we need to discuss, and we'll of course be talking about two, with the first one being called Atomic Spar. In this technique, after turning his fingers into blades, Daz crosses both hands over his chest before slashing forward with a downward X motion, instantly slicing anything in front of him. This was first seen in his battle against Zoro, and when this attack landed on Zoro, I truly believed that there was a chance that he defeated him right then and there. The man sliced through an entire house and then through Zoro's body, but Zoro was being 100% serious when he told Luffy that he would never lose again, so he somehow managed to will himself to stand again. The unique attacks that Daz is able to create with a devil fruit that makes his body fully blades are truly incredible, and that's the case for the other attack that we'll be talking about today as well. Speaking of that second technique, it's called Spiral Hollow, and it truly feels like Daz used that attack more than once in his fight against Zoro. In this technique, Daz creates circular blades along his forearms before making them spin, turning his forearms into mini tiller blades that shred anything they touch. His fists remain unchanged during this attack, and due to the way that the blades spin around Daz's arms, his arms resemble drills used by excavators. This was another attack that caused Zoro a ton of problems in their fight, but he was able to counter against it using his swords, especially when he grinded them against it. This was another attack that Daz managed to hit Zoro with in the climax of their fight, and if he was fighting anybody other than Zoro, then he would have won that fight right then and there. Daz Bones and the Supa no Mi make an absolutely incredible combo, and he's a character that I'll never forget because of the entertainment that he gave us during the Alabasta arc. And with that, we've talked about every single Paramecia type devil fruit user that I wanted to talk about in this video. Making the decision to only cover 5 characters per video is definitely going to make this series last a lot longer than maybe it should, but it's also going to make things easier for me in the long run, so I think that that's okay. We have so many interesting characters to talk about when it comes to this series, and the powers are only going to get crazier and more unique as it goes on. This means that there are now 2 different long-running series on the channel, but I'm absolutely fine with that, especially because it means a ton more content for you guys. With that being said, I've got some more content to make, and since I'm trying to upload more frequently, I think it's time to end things here. So please join me next time for whatever I post next. Please leave a like and maybe subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.